Wednesday, September 3rd, really big show. Jim Check from Now Media with me, Ian Burns, managing editor, all the way in the nation's capital. So we're coast to coast almost, right? If you call the Ottawa the coast. Well, if Quebec separates, then it would be the coast, I guess, right? So,
You can get out into the Atlantic if you're ambitious enough. Get into St. Lawrence there.
There you go, St. Lawrence there. We got a really big show, though, obviously. It's right in the title there. We always have a really big show. We do news differently here, for sure. Also want to plug something. We also do a local Kelowna-based newscast that's on at 3 o'clock. We live stream that. That's with Josh Duncan, our news director. And also want to plug tomorrow, big interview. On his 85th birthday, we're going to interview Walter Gray, the former and the longest-running mayor in Kelowna. That'll be tomorrow. So we got some actually really good stuff going on. We got Renee Merrifield today at noon would be on the ballot. And we've got the health critic tomorrow. We got lots of good stuff going on here at Now Media. But the big stuff, though, Canada needs a new sheriff that can bring law and order to this nation. Poilievre calls for Canadian youth first. The housing bubble popping in major Canadian cities. And Ford is a performing populist. I know you're going to like that one. Liberal and NDP policies undermining Canada. Lots of talk, not much walk from the ruling class. And all that and a lot more on the really big show. We got some international stuff too. A big display in China today too, with Xi Jinping showing off his hardware. Let's kick it off though with Mark Carney. The vacationing Mark Carney here, and he's going to drop. He had a big conversation with Donald Trump on Monday, and this is what you get out of it. Ready? Let's go.
I last spoke, exchange messages. I last spoke to the president Monday evening. We spoke at length on a wide range of issues, including on trade, but geopolitical, other issues, labor issues, etc. It was a good conversation. We have a team, a very senior team. The clerk of the Privy Council is there in Washington as we speak. That is meeting with the U.S. counterparts. Don't expect immediate white smoke on one of these strategic sectors, but that's the type of conversation that we're.
Did you cut that off or did that in there? Well, yeah, not much anyway. You get anything out of that?
I was a little bit, I've been a little bit concerned, as most people have in Canada, that we're not going to get a good deal, or maybe even any deal. But then when he reassured us there and said, there's a very senior team, or he said a senior team, a very senior team down there, I thought, oh, thank God for that. Because if you look at all of our senior politicians and senior bureaucrats over the last 10 or 20 years, look how well they've performed. Look at this glorious society that they've helped to maintain. So I'm at ease now, basically.
I thought you would be.
And also he's in a bantery mood, isn't he? Where he's like, messages. So obviously everything's good.
Well, it's pointed out here that Parliament resumes on September 15th, and when they return, they will work 53 days and then off again for another 30. Tough schedule, right? 2025 had them sitting for a total of 73 days. So, I mean, the worst crisis of our lifetime, they can only be bothered to actually sit Parliament for 73 days.
They're a right laugh, aren't they? And what would that work out as sort of dollars earned per actual time worked? It's like often I like to have a little bit of a laugh about teachers and how they, basically are part-time workers. But the politicians, the MPs, just take it to the next level, don't they? And they get a lot more money than teachers. Pretty funny.
What floors me is we have these people, especially the government-funded, corrupted media, that talk about how, there's a danger to democracy, with Poilievre, and a danger to democracy with Trump and all this stuff. And here it is, the Liberals sit for 73 days. That's an insult to democracy right there, because isn't Parliament all about democracy? And also, they've corrupted all the media, crippled it with Bill C-18. We're going to talk about that later. Crippled it with Bill C-18, and then have had them selectively choose which outlets they're going to fund. And then CBC, most of their salaries paid for by government funding and the Liberal government funding. And also, most of the other legacy media, over almost half their salaries funded by the government. So no worries about democracy here in Canada.
It is interesting, though, when you look at this in light of democracy, because the story of the birth of democracy as we know it, which occurred in England, it's in many cases, when you actually read through the histories, it's demands from people beneath the king, and then later on, like beneath the ruling class in general. It's demands for Parliament to convene more often. That's like, it comes down to that in a lot of cases where you just read about it, right up to the sort of Glorious Revolution. It's just, we must have more frequent parliaments because it's not fair. Because in the absence of Parliament, you have rule by the executive, don't you? In the case of the story in England, it's the rule by the king. And it is quite interesting to highlight because we have had quite a lot of executive rule, haven't we, so far in Carney's time as the boss, and it's intrigues me.
What we do get is a lot of gaslighting. We get a lot of gaslighting deflection. So they scream about democracy in threat, and they're the ones that threaten democracy, especially a lot of their government-funded media and some of these podcasters with liberal bias. They're definitely, like they scream about to look over there when they don't bother to look in the mirror.
Well, you talk about the media, you talk about money that they give. That's kind of new, and that is like very obvious. It's very in your face, isn't it? And that's an easy subject to discuss. But they're also still doing all the old stuff that governments used to do, vis-a-vis the media, which is like they only give interviews to certain publications. That's one pretty important thing, isn't it? So they won't give an interview to us, for example. Obviously, I've been trying to get interviews with loads of them for ages, and they've got to the point now where they just ignore me. But they will give interviews to their friends, like the Canadian press, who are going to be nice to them. They're going to ask them all the questions that they want to be asked. It'll be easy peasy. Bob's your uncle. I mean, things like that, just ignoring the press, or the Privy Council office yesterday telling me, no, I will not tell you. I am not going to reveal to you what we spent on Facebook ads. You can wait till 2026. Then you'll learn that when we release it in the documents. I mean, it's those old-fashioned ways. They're all still in play, as well as the more explicit, like on the nose stuff, like giving money to certain media outlets and not to others.
I'm just going to share that. We've been doing that story on the Carney Liberals spending over $5 million on Meta after they said they were going to boycott it. That was up to about March when you last updated that. So we said, let's get an update on that, see what they've spent since March. You reached out, took forever, no response. They finally responded and said, yeah, we're not going to release that information. You can actually get that information in January of 2026. So somebody must have run that up the flagpole and said, well, we were giving that information out before. They've embarrassed us with that information, and then so now we're just not going to release it. That's a free democracy. And these same people will talk about Trump as a dictator when he takes, 3-4 press conferences a day, takes questions all day long. And then we have a government here that refuses to take questions and refuses to do interviews. And then when we did finally get in front of the Prime Minister, we were allowed one question and no follow-up. And we were going to ask about the BC ferries, but we figured we should press on Bill C-18 because somebody surely was going to ask about BC ferries. And lo and behold, the government-funded media did not ask about BC ferries. That question still hasn't been answered by Mark Carney.
No, but Chrystia Freeland pretended that it didn't happen in quite an interesting little speech yesterday.
Pierre Poilievre dropped the hammer. He says he wants the end of the temporary foreign worker program so that Canadians can get jobs first, calling for a Canadian youth first based on the unemployment rate here in Canada. 1.6 million Canadians jobless, Liberals still importing cheap labor, and some world organizations say that it is questionable as to possibly a modern-day slavery ring. But here, let's listen in on Pierre Poilievre.
And let's be honest, young people today form what I call Generation Screwed. Let's look at the situation for this generation. It is the first generation that cannot afford a home in Canadian history. And now, the double gut punch. They have the highest, or the worst employment numbers of any group of young people since the late 1990s. So you can't get a job, and even if you did have a job, you can never buy a home after 10 years of Liberal government. The Liberals doubled housing costs. They unleashed crime and chaos in our communities with their soft laws. They broke our immigration system by allowing too many, too fast, too easily to come into the country. And they have destroyed our economy by pushing investment out of our country. Now, Mark Carney promised that he would be different. he has been worse than Justin Trudeau in almost every objective measurement. Let's go through the promises. He promised to build, baby, build. Well, far from doubling home building as he promised, home building is expected to drop by 13%, according to his own housing agency. As for major national projects, 5 months in, and there's not a single national project that Mr. Carney has even identified, much less permitted, much less having shovels in the ground. Not one pipeline, not one mine, not one major expansion of a port. All we have is meetings, offices, new bureaucracies, new high-paid big shots with big salaries who have thus far achieved absolutely nothing. The time has come for decisive action to stop the Liberals from using our immigration system to pad the pockets of corporate elites and other insiders at the expense of Canadian jobs. Again, the principle is very simple. The principle is very simple. Canadian jobs for Canadian workers. Canada first, Canada always. That's why Conservatives are calling on the Carney government to permanently scrap the temporary foreign worker program and to stop issuing visas for any new temporary foreign workers coming into the country. Under this proposal, existing permits would be wound down until the program is entirely eliminated. Canadian jobs will go to Canadian workers first. It's time that Mr.
I don't know how you argue against that, but I'm sure they'll figure out a way.
Well, I've got a few comments that, no, he has a lot of fanboys still, doesn't he, Poilievre? And I feel like nobody else would make these criticisms. So the first one is, why have you changed your mind? Didn't say very much about this last year, the year before, or even in the election, really, not all that much. Like, where's he been on this question of immigration? But suddenly now he's seen the light. I mean, and I don't think that that's an accurate description either. I don't think it is that he's seen the light. I think that he's had a conversation about strategy and thought, okay, let's talk about immigration now. In which case, that's kind of cynical, isn't it? That's one comment. The other comment is it's Canadian jobs for Canadian workers, except in agriculture, because he says he wants to abolish that and then create a new program just for agricultural workers. So, okay. Not quite as consistent as it seems. And then the other thing I would say is, look, it's blurred out because it's like the apertures, it's quite a wide aperture, so you can't actually see who's behind them. But I just have to laugh at the brains of politicians who thought, all right, we're going to make this big announcement about immigration. Who's going to be standing behind us? Yeah, you, and you. Why did you pick those three people to stand behind you, Pierre? That's just like pitiable, pathetic behavior, isn't it? But what you'd expect from these show ponies. But as for the foreign worker program, I mean, basically everything that he says, I would say, is supported by the majority of Canadians, and is common sense, that thing that he likes to pretend that he has exclusive possession of in Canada. And it's not even a new thing. This is not a modern problem, as we've talked about before, and Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx. But I mean, the corn laws in England in the 19th century, like there are so many of these examples. The Roman Empire, which we've mentioned, this has happened so many times, where magnates, people with a lot of money and power, employers, the ownership class, whatever you want to call them, try and relegate the cost of labor. They try and relegate the wages that can be demanded so that they can make more money and do business easier. And I find it very interesting that Mark Carney, you showed that clip just then of Mark Carney. Find it very interesting that he was asked that question. And not the first thing, but basically the only thing of substance that he said in response to the question was, I'll tell you that when I speak to businesses all across Canada, the first thing that they come to me and want to talk about is the temporary foreign worker program and how they need more labor. Of course they do, Mark. Of course they do that. That's just in their DNA, because they want to pay less for salaries so that they can make more money for themselves. Of course. And, if you're interested in learning more about that, consult a history book, just any, and you will learn that.
Yeah, there's no denying that this runaway immigration that the Liberals put into place, I mean, nobody could deny it, that has caused, well, they can deny it, but the facts speak for themselves. It's caused a health crisis. People can't access doctors. Now it's causing a crisis in youth unemployment. It's caused a crisis in rents, escalating rents, inflation, a whole bunch of things because we brought in just basic supply and demand. Too much demand, not enough supply. And that's what triggered all this. And he's jumping on an issue that is becoming really, really relevant for so many people, especially young people. The people that his breadbasket of voters for Carney, they aren't affected, because a lot of them are retired or boomers or don't need a job, and it basically sold out the Canadian youth. And I think, it's a topic that's an easy win, other than with the government corrupted media. Let's move on to talk about housing, though. Here it is, Metro Vancouver Housing Collapse Facebook group saying slowing housing market will trigger construction job losses. And this is happening in some of the major cities across Canada right now. We're seeing this sluggish demand, low housing starts. And remember, Carney's Liberals promised 500,000 housing starts a year. And that number is actually lower, trending lower than last year. So, and even in Calgary, housing starts have fell 8.8% in August compared to last year. Not a good time.
Very, very appropriate that you put this story after the last one, because obviously it was immigration that was propping up the demand for housing, even though, a lot of experts still refuse to acknowledge that basic fact. But I mean, this is just yet another. This is just going to be yet another promise that he can't keep. And it's very strange because when he made that promise about all the homes that he was going to see built in Canada, right away, people were just like, this is not going to happen. This is obviously not going to happen. It's not physically possible to even do this, even if, everything else, all the ducks were in a row in terms of demand and all the rest of it. It wasn't even possible to do it. And yet, still that promise was made. So I feel this guy, Gregor Robertson, we got a little picture of him here in the next one, talking about Toronto. Like, he's just been given such a
you don't have
such
it?
a hospital pass there, hasn't he? I don't think he's going to come out of this government looking like a superstar, put it that way.
Yeah, because in that next one, we're looking for it here. The Toronto condo market is in free fall, and that's from the federal housing minister, Gregor Robertson. And it says we're in a housing bubble following a tour of, Toronto and Ontario, they're in tough shape. So is Vancouver in the condo market. And, there's policies they put into place, even here in the Okanagan, they put into that Airbnb policy that is now, we have rental vacancies that are probably approaching 5, 6, 7%. I haven't seen that for a long time. And then the cranes are coming down for building condos and not going back up, and they can't sell the inventory that's sitting there. There's condos now sitting there for, a year and a half, not selling. And they've scared investment money away. People they used to sell these developments out. So you scare the investment money away with all these legislations and all these rules and regulations, and then you wonder what's happening. It's just absolutely nonsense. And then...
But this is going to be, by the way, just before we move on to the next one, these people are also going to demand the more immigration, aren't they? Because it's just a simple question of income and profit. It's their business model. So they're going to be saying, oh, yeah, come on, lads, we definitely need more immigration. Don't be silly about that now.
And you'll notice that the colleges and the universities will be screaming for the same thing because they built their whole business model around immigration.
And it's like we're playing a game of bloody Monopoly, and these are the properties that they have. So they don't care about anything else. They just want to make sure that their properties bring money in.
The benefit of the few at the expense of the many. The many not accessing healthcare, inflation, no jobs, all those things at the expense of the many. But the benefit of the few, the ones that are, lucky enough to have a university professor job, or the ones, like these developers that were making out like bandits. Well, this thing was going on. Yeah. Doug Ford has to be one of the biggest populists out there. He says he's a conservative, but look at this. He This has got to be a comical image of he dumps out a bottle of Crown Royal and he forgets to take out the slow pour thing, so it takes forever to dump out. It's one of those like glug 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 glug. You know what I mean? Like just
Have we got the video? Because it is funny when he steps in front of the podium and he's like, you know what, folks, with his little routine.
really kind of like
He is an embarrassment.
he's just Doug Ford. Like I don't know who's still buying this stuff. Who's still buying what Doug Ford is selling? And
Well, the latest polls for Ontario, he's like 20 or more points ahead.
That's what I mean.
This is the thing. We talk about Mark Carney and we say like, well, that's a bit sketchy, Mark. Like, you're going to lose some support over that. And then a poll comes out, and one came out today, and there he is, 10 points ahead. The Liberals 10 points ahead. And here we have Doug Ford, who you would have thought people would have realized by now that he says things and then doesn't do anything. Right? He's literally in a he's in power. He's in a position to change things. And instead he just says, I don't like what them judges are doing. And then just leaves it. Nothing happens. It's like you'd think people would figure that out. And yet, no, 20 points ahead in the polls. It's just
Canada's Trump.
It's just easy, isn't it? It's just he's not even trying.
He's Canada's Donald Trump. He's definitely just a foolish man. And this is Holly Doan from Blacklocks put out this tweet. Foolish stunt by Doug Ford. Crown Royal is made in Gimli, Manitoba, my home province. They have lots of other operations, employ lots of Canadians, and also use a lot of Canadian agricultural products. And they closed one factory or one plant, and this is what they want to do. They want to pull it off all the shelves and everything. So you want to cost a lot more jobs, right? And then
and that's just because it's in Ontario, isn't it? That's the reason. So he's just, and to quote him, you hurt my people, I'll hurt you. It's all about him being like Mr. Ontario, isn't it? He doesn't care about Manitoba or anything like that, which is kind of fair enough, I guess, to an extent. Although he does kind of sell himself as Captain Canada.
And then this is Ron Butler. They use lots for real estate stuff. He's a mortgage broker. And he's saying pouring whiskey out made in Canada because of expense. He says they moved that plant because of expensive hydro, heat, and taxes that drove the bottling plant to the U.S. But there's hundreds of other employees in other provinces. And here's some comedy for you. Foreigners have joined Doug Ford in removing Crown Royal off the shelves. And we see this lots on the internet, tons and tons of this, where they just walk into the liquor stores and just help themselves to the liquor and then walk out. I don't know how many videos I've seen in Ontario liquor stores where they just walk in with bags and take out. I guess they're working for Doug Ford now, taking it off the shelves.
Well, it's paid for by people like me. It's paid for by taxpayers, obviously. And even he said that. Doug Ford said that. It's like, it's the taxpayers that pay for this. It's kind of, you'd think, wouldn't you, Dougie, that again, being in a position of power, that maybe you would change things. I like, it isn't just Canada. We see it in the US. I mean, we've seen ridiculous examples in the US. Even in England, there's some really funny ones in England because they have security guards in England with like the high visibility jackets and everything. They look very intimidating, but they obviously don't do anything because the law prevents them from acting, and it's the same pretty much in Ontario. So they started to call them urban scarecrows now, security guards in places like England, because that's basically what they are. They're like scarecrows. They just sort of stand there, and you said if you're a stupid enough bird, you'll fly away and be scared. But realistically, if you know the rules of the game, you can just steal whatever you want. It's fine. Nobody's going to stop you.
Yeah, the theme of our show is Canada needs a new sheriff and to bring law and order back to Canada. And this just illustrates some of that as well. And this is from Mark Nixon. Doug Ford tells Canadians to boycott Canadian company that employs about 700 people. And only one plant leaving. 78% of the workers still Canadian. So, Doug Ford, he's just a populist, right? And he just loves performing. He's the Canadian entertainer politician, I guess you want to call him, or whatever. His brother wasn't much different, though, right? Rob Ford was quite the entertainer as well.
Yeah, he was. I think possibly he was funnier, I would say, than old Dougie there. Dougie seems to be trying very hard, and it's like, he reminds me. I know you've mentioned Trump, and in terms of who in Canada, he's the closest that we have to Trump. But if we look around the world for analogs, I would say the best is Boris Johnson. I've said this before. Boris Johnson was very much like that, where and even same color hair, sort of, where he would just do these ridiculous stunts, and he would try and like figure out what the people were upset about, and he would tap into that, and he would do a stunt like that, and then when he was in power, he would just do nothing. He'd do nothing at all. Or in some cases, he would actually do the opposite of what he said and make things worse.
Yeah, one thing Doug Ford hasn't done, he hasn't sold his Brookfield shares. He hasn't said that when, Mark Carney moved Brookfield's headquarters to the south. He hasn't done anything about that, has he? Have you seen anything about him talking about Brookfield?
The only things I've ever seen him say about Mark Carney are how great he is. To be honest, it's just constantly, he's the greatest. I love him. He's doing the best he can, kind of thing.
The Liberals and the government-funded media working overtime to make Danielle Smith look like the bad person. And I'm not sure, why that question isn't asked by the media is how those books got in there in the first place, the ones with the graphic images that we showed a little glimpse of it yesterday. But, Danielle Smith coming out defending herself. She said, I'm going to be more explicit than usual, so there's more understanding. Get the pornographic images out of school libraries. Leave the classics on the shelves. But they've twisted it into some other thing. They've made this list in the Edmonton Public School Board. And it's just turned into a bit of a circus. And that's what they do. They confuse and conflate, and they bring out the label gun. And just some of the comments, we're looking at on our TikTok, some of the people, they don't have a real argument. All they do is attack. With labels and stuff like that. I mean, it's just part of the MO. And this is David Knight Legg here saying that the Edmonton Public School Board are removing obvious literary works that were widely accepted alongside the obviously inappropriate pornography are actually trying to desperately hide the fact. And that's what's really going on there. And that's that next slide there. That's what's really going on there. They're just confusing, conflating the issue. And again, the question should be, how did those books get in there in the first place? In an elementary school. How did they get in there? That's the question reporters should be asking, shouldn't they? Who approved those books and why?
They don't want to talk about, the press, which, as we've said millions of times, broadly support the Liberal Party and left-wing ideas, causes. They just have no interest whatsoever in those extremely graphic books. They just don't care. Or they think that it's some kind of... I saw Nenshi come out with a comment where it's like, this is a culture war started by Danielle Smith. It's like, you what? Did Danielle Smith put in books into elementary schools of kids, let's not even go there, but of very graphic sexual acts? Obviously not. That's where the culture war was started, you clown. Not by somebody trying to stop it. But I think this is right. You've highlighted what Danielle Smith has said and this Legg person. They're right, and it was an amazingly cheap and low grade effort, I think, to try and conflate those two things. It's just obfuscation, isn't it? That's the fancy name for what they've tried to do. But I feel like, and I said this yesterday, the more interesting question, and I still maintain that this is true, is if you look at what she said, leave the classics, Danielle Smith says, leave the classics on the shelves. So should we leave Lolita on the shelves? Can we talk about Lolita, for God's sake? A book that clearly nobody has read, including Danielle Smith, I would assume. They've got no idea. Obviously these graphic images, they're stunning and they shock you and all the rest of it. Lolita is a book about paying a child money to perform sexual acts on a man. And it's pretty graphic. Read the book. Have some consistency here. But I feel like there's a tiny handful of people that have actually read these books. So I'm just, I'm shouting into the void, really, aren't I?
Well, again, I'll go back to the original question that I would have if I got a chance to stand there, which they don't allow you to, and that's how did that one book that she points out there, how did that get in there in the first place? Who approved that book? That person should be fired.
Yeah, and was it being used as a sort of classroom tool? Was it being used to teach kids? And if that's true, then yeah, that is. I know it was in the US. That book came out of the US, didn't it? That particularly egregious example that we were looking at yesterday. But I don't know about Canada, and if so, but if it has been used, it's just deplorable, isn't it? That's terrible behavior.
And then Sean Fraser, the minister that used to be the immigration minister, and then the housing minister, he left a wake behind him there. Now he's the justice minister. And he said, this isn't the Wild West, it's Canada. And this is from the Police Association here in Durham. When bullets are flying in open spaces in all different directions, having the potential to strike completely innocent individuals, or an 8-year-old who is struck by a stray bullet in a shootout while asleep in bed, or a youth murdered in the open and full public court washroom, it does resemble the Wild West. And it goes on, you can read it. There is escalating crime, and especially crime of headline material that is just baffling Canadians. And that's the thing, that some of these are just just stunning, and then they get let out, and then you have to wonder. When we talked about that one yesterday, that guy that broke into a home and raped a 5-year-old child, and then and this is in his first offense, and
Terrible. I mean, it's not quite as much of a headline, but just now, if you look in our inbox, our newsroom inbox, a story has come in from Nanaimo. A 16-year-old and a 26-year-old have been arrested on suspicion of stabbing a 21-year-old man during a robbery and theft of vehicle. I mean, Nanaimo's had problems with crime, but 16-year-old involved in a stabbing in a robbery. I mean, it's the nature of the crimes, isn't it? And this is why it doesn't quite wash when people say, "Oh, look at these statistics that show that crime is actually down on compared to 1995 or something like that." That doesn't really make people feel any better, does it? When they're seeing headlines like this, and sometimes they're even seeing, they're seeing the like cops in their street and stuff. Like it's quite close to them. It's not just a headline.
yeah, and I did see the government-funded media highlight a story out of the U.S. because they have the castle laws there, and they use that as an example. The guy broke into the home, but he was already fleeing, and then the guy from the house shot him in the back while he was out in the yard, and then that person was charged with murder. You know what I mean? It's different, but they try to say, "Well, look, is this what we want here in Canada?" Like, there's a difference between when somebody's already fleeing and you shoot them in the back, than somebody's in your home with a crossbow, or somebody's in your home raping your children. You know what I mean? But they conflate and confuse again, and that's what they do. That's what they do. The question is, why, though? Why don't they want you to be able to protect yourself in your own home?
Yeah. Well, similar. It's related as well, I think, to gun ownership laws as well, isn't it? It's just this. It's a desire to control all things. But I mean, there are some cynical people out there who talk about the concept of anarcho-tyranny. I don't know if you've heard of that, which is where the good citizens can't protect themselves and they're constantly punished by the state, while the bad citizens are basically free to do whatever they want and the law won't chase them down. And you can see why cynics have come up with that concept, because obviously if that's going on and you're in charge, it's easy to rule, isn't it? It's much, much easier to rule in those circumstances because everything's in disarray, and you can come in and be the sort of strong hand that pretends to fix things.
And then here's somebody here. We got a little clip here to play. In the Wild, Wild West. Look at this one. This is crazy. Let me play that clip.
So I came to go to the bank this morning, and this is what happened. Apparently, some people stole this piece of machinery and took the entire ATM.
So I guess the question is that shoplifting as well? Do the police look the other way for this one too? Because you walk into a liquor store, they say, go ahead and take it. So in this case, they actually used an excavator and went into the bank and shoplifted the ATM machine. Was that the same thing?
Shop smashing.
Is that the same thing then? We ignore that as well? That's okay, Sean Fraser? That's good? So what's left then, right? Because these are going to be copycatted. You guarantee that heavy equipment is all over the place, right? And it's not hard to find the keys for that equipment. Do you know what I mean? Like I worked on construction sites. Usually they're under the seat or in the visor.
Don't give them ideas.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure they know. And you can use it. You can use almost anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, and this has been done in the past where they've used just big 4-wheel drive pickups too, and they just lash a chain around it and just rip it out. But yeah, obviously the excavator can do a hell of a job, right?
Yeah, very quickly as well.
And then here's another one, Sean Fraser. Husband and wife shot at by a large group. We're not going to play this clip here. By a large group of people in a white SUV in Mississauga. Not the Wild West, though. Like this is happening in Canada.
I know. I would say, yeah, it's not the Wild West because, again, I hate to sound like, like some sort of mediocre academic, but read a book. If you've ever read about the Wild West, you would know that people were often punished. They were hanged or
Yeah.
imprisoned for life. That's not happening in Canada. So the analogy doesn't work. It's some other kind of, you need a new analogy because there were punishments in the Wild West. In Canada, that doesn't really happen all that much. And that's why people are so upset, isn't it? That's like the citizens of like Tombstone, Arizona or whatever, they actually now and then got to see the evildoers hanged and justice done. We're not seeing that really in Canada, are we? And it's not just hanging, but even any kind of justice.
Yeah, and here's one here that you put in 5 things. Canadian medical groups relieved that the accreditation system now divorced from the U.S. Why? Why are they? This has started before Trump, though, but now they say the plan to divorce from the American system was hatched before Trump's re-election, but the group said recent moves by the U.S. government to get rid of diversity, equity, inclusion requirements central to accreditation process makes it so they can still hang on to the DEI principles here in Canada because they divorced themselves from the American system.
Just astonishing, isn't it?
Doesn't that make you feel
is
better?
apparently
Hey.
anti. This is yeah, exactly. They even spell it out a lot more clearly than that, where they say one of the people associated with this organization comes out, or one of these organizations comes out and says, this way we can hire people from ethnic minorities. Make sure that they get jobs or something. It's like, you what, mate? You're talking about like surgeons and stuff here. What are you talking about? Make sure that people get jobs if they're not necessarily qualified. I mean, that's the general idea behind this, isn't it? That's the idea behind equity. It's like
You feel
they
better
haven't
now?
had
Hey,
the same advantages as you have, so therefore
look,
we can let them in with a C. It's like, no, no, thank you.
you feel better now?
No, I
Another.
don't. But I also find this hilarious that it's like this is Canadian patriotism, isn't it? A kind of manifestation of anti-American Canadian patriotism. And how are they expressing their Canadian patriotism? By hanging on to an American idea after the Americans have abandoned it. That's Canadian patriotism,
I'm
if you're
gonna
wondering.
and I'm gonna take you back to the interview I did with Lisa Bildy, the constitutional lawyer here for Amy Ham, and where she said America exports all its culture wars, DEI, but with none of the protections of the First Amendment rights. And here's another one. This is exported from the United States. The Americans now abandoned it, but Canada clings to it like it's some kind of like holy grail. And who wins out of it? Definitely not people that have earned the right to become a doctor or a nurse. Anyway.
It's just astonishing, and it's not the only example. But isn't it ironic? You talk about the First Amendment. Why couldn't we have taken that idea and hung on to it? Why do we have to take all of the bad ideas? The First Amendment is a good idea. Can we have that? And can we trade them DEI back? They can have that back, and we'll have the First Amendment. I mean, is there any kind of deal that we can do here?
Who are some of the architects? Because these are English architects that put in the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment rights. Who are some of those architects? You know them. They're all English people, aren't they? And they seem to be way before their time, and they seem to have put in policies that have stood the test of time. Jefferson?
Totally, it's remarkable. And that includes the Second Amendment. People like to get on their high horse about that, but I mean, the principle behind that is quite strong and hard to argue against, I think. The idea that the citizenry should be able to kind of defend itself. But yeah, it's people like James Madison. I mean, obviously they were born in the colonies, but they were born in the British Empire. James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, particularly shrewd people. But they were influenced as well by the English Bill of Rights from the 17th century, 1689, I think it was, the English Bill of Rights, which also has a kind of Second Amendment and similar sort of. I mean, it's very similar if you read the list.
This from the Justice Center from Constitutional Freedoms. And I believe I have an interview with one of their lawyers on, I do on tomorrow at 1:30. And this they put out this piece here on COVID. They've got a report they're releasing. Canadians died at an alarming rate between 2020 and 2024. Internet's not going to like this one, right? In their latest report, Post-COVID Canada, the rise in unexpected deaths. They explore that died over the past 5 years. What lessons did policy designers and public must learn? So anyway, we're going to talk about that. So Canada,
I
you're
mean,
still
that's
not
going to
allowed to
be
talk about it.
extremely controversial, isn't it? I don't think it's controversial to say that deaths were caused by lockdowns. I think that gradually that's now starting to become accepted. But vaccine mandates, that they're going to get a lot of pushback on that, aren't they? But they still deserve to have their voice heard. You know, this is quite an important organization. So unlike the rest of the Canadian media, we will actually listen to them and talk to them. Whereas everybody else will just say, nah.
China. Nah, you don't want to hear about that.
don't
And
want
then
to hear about vaccines.
and here's Holly Doan, the Blacklock's embarrassing the Liberal government yet again. And then you won't see this story in mainstream media today. Cabinet yesterday transferred control of the Canadian Coast Guard to the Defense Department under Minister David McGuinty. It followed a 2024 audit that complained Maritime Service fell into disrepair when managed by the Department of Fisheries. There's another department in disrepair. Said that they're going to streamline. The Coast Guard has been under supervision of Fisheries Department since 1995 and previously the Department of Transport. But they did include the budget, the $2.4 billion budget into NATO, though, right? So, but
that's kind of the rationale, I think, isn't it?
Here's the thing. The Coast Guard is facing challenges recruiting and retaining qualified personnel due to lack of qualified candidates in the market with certifications relevant specialties. A high degree of competition between Coast Guard industry partners, other government departments further complicates the Coast Guard's ability to attract. Haven't they not heard of DEI? They don't need people that are qualified.
They just need to represent important voting blocks so that we can win elections.
There you go. See, they just don't know. And this, I've interviewed Scott McInnes, MLA here for the Conservatives here in BC. We would have an interview request out to Terry Young, the NDP minister for, I'm losing my mind here. Terry Young, the minister for,
Is it not? I thought it was jobs, employment, or something like that.
No. He's for like the crime. He's a former RCMP officer. I'm just losing the name of the
community safety.
There you go, community safety. Lost my mind.
And integrated services.
So
which means nothing.
We're still going back and forth. You know, they're saying they don't have no time, and then I sent them a thing on democracy and access to you know that. So we're still waiting to hear back. But I do have an interview with Brennan Day, the critic from the Conservatives. Again, we can get them, the Conservatives for rural health here. But Scott McInnes, MLA out there in Kamloops there, actually Revelstoke, sorry. And he's written to the Attorney General, Nikki Sharma, says on this Cowichan ruling. And I talked about this because I interviewed quite a few people on this already. And they're saying now that those lands, and I said that in the interview, those private land sales in Richmond now require consent of the Cowichan Nation to change the title on those. So basically, those properties have a cloud over them. And they'll be. I interviewed the lawyer there that worked for the government for about 31 years in Aboriginal law. And these properties you won't be able to sell right now. Like, I mean, who's going to buy them? Who's going to mortgage them?
No, just think about it in a personal capacity. Like, would you ever touch that? No way
Even,
at all. Touch that in a million years.
So the properties, say the property's worth $1 million, just pick a number, and then somebody offered you for $250. Most people still wouldn't take it because you could throw away the $250, right? Because it's got a cloud over it, you know? And then that cloud is starting to hang over a lot of properties here in British Columbia. So if the NDP don't do something, they could cause a lot of turmoil here in British Columbia. Speaking of the NDP,
you mentioned James Madison and the framers of the U.S. Constitution and all that. And if we're thinking about like what makes a country, how do you make the sort of rules, the system of rules that makes a successful country? Probably number one is property rights and guarantee that your property is yours. There's no confusion. You're the boss. Like, you spend your money, you invest it. This belongs to you. And obviously they made sure when they framed the Constitution in the US, they made sure that that was respected. And then you look at this, it's almost like, and I see this in other areas in Canadian life, it's almost like they're trying to undo the things that have made Canada successful in the first place. And I mean, I would like to summon James Madison's corpse to come and observe what's going on here.
I always like the comments, from people. That we got one here from Dennis A, where they don't have a picture of themselves, they don't have a last name, but they just say this is a waste of time. Delete this channel. But they don't want to talk about they don't want to talk about the ideas or anything. It's just like liberal bots out there, and they're just like all they do is want to label and denigrate, and like it's just like I mean it's just like it's not going to work. You know what I mean? Like I think
But
people.
Dennis makes a good point. Should we delete our channel? I mean, Dennis seems like a pretty wise guy.
Yeah,
He's
like
got a
that.
lot going for him, hasn't he?
Yeah. Anyway.
Cheers, Dennis. Anyway.
Dennis, formerly of the NDP, I think. The federal NDP launches its race to find the next new leader. There's Jagmeet waving, I think he's waving at his party and saying, that's the end of the NDP. But
only, I mean, you can only be elected leader as long as you get enough people that aren't cisgender men, which is a slur for men.
Yeah, so the party is limiting signatures from cis men. I didn't even know what that meant for a while. Somebody explained to me that cis means. I don't know how that thing. That's what I mean. The Liberals and the NDP love a label gun, and they figured out a new label for white men, cis men. And
well, you can be non-white and be cis. It just means man, basically.
Oh.
I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with skin color.
What is it? Why is cis men then why two men, cis men? Like I don't get it.
Because Jim, you're so behind on the times here. Because there's also such a thing as a trans man, which is actually a person born as a woman but who identifies as a man, and that's a man too, just like a man is a man.
But anyway, you need to get
cis man.
You need to get 500 signatures, and you also got to cough up some dough. You got to cough up $100,000 to run. The candidates must pay $100,000. Now that's tripled or more than tripled because it used to be $30,000 in the last contest when Jagmeet got the deal. And voting is limited to delegates holding $25 membership. So they're really on a fundraising thing because I don't think the party has any money. I think they still owe a lot of money from the last election, actually. So you have until January 1st to get your $100,000 together if you're thinking about running there, Ian. And
how much? Like, I don't think there's much hype about the NDP. Like, how much are they realistically going to raise? I feel like they might have to bring that down a bit because I have a feeling that they're going to struggle to, like any member is going to struggle to raise that, aren't they?
Here's a couple of Globe and Mail reporters going at each other. Andrew Coyne writes, NDP leadership rules are out and they limit signature for cis men. He's definitely got TDS, and he's definitely a crazy person. And, well, acts crazy anyway. I shouldn't say is crazy. He acts crazy. He has TDS for sure. And then here's Robin Urbach saying, well, they should at least make sure that the cis men only donate half the money too then.
I don't know. She often makes, she often tweets things that are generally against the Globe and Mail's editorial stance. I think she's like the court jester at the Globe and Mail or something, isn't she?
She's definitely got some common sense. Whereas Andrew Coyne, I think, lost all of his when he was counting up all that liberal government funding. Oh, let's go to Chrystia Freeland, though. She says, and this is how they personalize stuff. Steel's very special to her. This is from Holly Jones. Steel workers are actually personally very special. Who cares what is special to you, right? Isn't it special to Canada? And that's the Transport Minister, Chrystia Freeland, said yesterday in pledging to promote Canadian metal products. Freeland made no mention of taxpayers' financing of Chinese shipyards, though. They just ignore that question. Where's the reporters pounding on this question? Here you're
Somebody asked her the question. Somebody did ask her the question, but it was phrased in such a pathetic way. It was phrased, it was something like, how can we make sure that in future we can do everything possible to give ferry or ship manufacturers in Canada the kind of wherewithal so that they can bid on these contracts in future. Just totally misses the point. Totally misses the point. And it completely buys into the idea that that was a totally legit process, that and the Canadian shipbuilders were just too crap or too stupid to bid. The reason that they didn't bid is because they knew that the Chinese Communist Party was going to bid, and no entity on this earth can compete with the Chinese Communist Party when it comes to manufacturing, because they will steal intellectual copyright, they'll use slave labor, they'll undercut you in every way, they'll use dodgy raw materials, everything you might want to list, they'll do it, and they'll beat you. Every single time they'll beat you on cost. None of this was
I would,
mentioned. That reporter, I mean, I'm ashamed of that person. I'm ashamed to say that we have the same sort of job title,
I would
loosely
almost,
speaking, that he
I
would
would
ask such
almost,
a. And she even responded. She was like, "Well, that's an excellent question." It's like, yeah, it is an excellent question for you, isn't it? Easy. It's an easy question for you.
I would almost say that's a planted question by government-funded media, where they can actually say, "Well, we did address that. It was asked, but it was asked in a way that it doesn't make the government accountable." It's like, how do we look forward? Why don't we look backwards and pull back that loan? Like, nobody's
Yeah,
being made
totally.
to,
No question. There was
nobody's being
no
made to
question.
answer
Like,
this question.
why did you allow this to happen, and why don't you kill it now that you still have the chance? The ships haven't been built yet. Kill the loan, kill the deal, and make it here, or at least make it somewhere like Korea, like some a country that we're friends with. But that question isn't even asked. It's just, well, in future, how do we make sure these stupid companies in Canada can actually do something because they're so crap? And then
And
she
this,
loves that, and she's like, we've got conferences, we're going to have meetings and funding maybe, and then we'll make sure that it works next time.
and this is at the same time that the Chinese Ministry of Commerce is basically killing our canola industry with 75% tariffs. And in the meanwhile,
And
this
also at the
reporter,
same time that we're supposed to be looking at these videos out of Beijing and like quaking in our boots and being scared because they're looking at the Chinese military,
we're
because
going to
we
see that
acknowledge
later.
that China is a geopolitical foe of ours, a sort of enemy, and yet all of this just right over the head of the average Canadian
So
journalist. It's just like it doesn't even. It's not something that they're even thinking about.
viewers need to understand this very well. We have a government corrupted media that has been basically crippled, and then they hand out little scraps for them. So then they basically, like, that was a fed question. Because the question is what you said. It should be like hard. And why aren't we pulling this back? This is ridiculous. And it just basically gives the liberals an out. And then when somebody else actually gets up there, gets asked that question, we've answered that question. They haven't answered that question. They have not answered that question. And they continue to dodge it. Let's listen to Chrystia Freeland, see if she strikes any confidence in you.
As a country, we need to very, very quickly get really, really good at using the steel and aluminum that we're so good at producing across our entire economy.
Like on BC Ferries. I'm going to say that. BC Ferries, Chrystia. You know why they don't let us in the room? You know why they don't let us in the room? Because we'd ask that question. And we wouldn't ask it in a way that's...
Well, you know, and it's also there are other people that would probably ask that question, but yeah, they're not in the room either, are they? But I mean, talking about people being in the room, why is she in the room? Like, let's be serious here. I don't want to hurt your feelings, Chrystia. I do appreciate your loyalty and watching this show from the beginning. But why are you in this job? Do you really think that you're the best person in Canada, like the number one person in Canada to manage transport and infrastructure in this country? Like, just resign. Resign.
And you want to talk about other corruption here? Like this EV mandate and all this money that Canada has spent on Northvolt just declared that they're done in Quebec there. And we can listen to this clip here from CBC and how they, you know, let's watch it first.
And frankly, industrial policy generally has had a really rough summer, especially in manufacturing, of course, because of these trade issues. Yesterday, for example, the latest sign of this word from the Quebec government that it is going to be pulling the plug on its partnership on Northvolt's much touted but very troubled electric battery plant in rural Quebec. That is 3,000 jobs that aren't going to materialize, several hundred millions of dollars of taxpayer money that's down the drain.
How is that a problem of Trump? They're not doing EVs. They don't have no EV mandates in the United States. So why? I mean, this should be like a bonus for us, though. All the EV plants should be all ours. Like, we should be like just glowing. And this Northvolt has been in trouble way before Trump showed up. Northvolt has been in trouble. But did you listen to the CBC reporter? Who did she blame for Northvolt's peril?
But I mean, obviously CBC will cover for the Liberal Party. Their paymasters. Makes perfect sense that they would do that. I'm not even interested. Like, you have fun, Mr. CBC, or Mrs. CBC in this case.
Well, listen.
But an interesting question is, who did Pablo Rodriguez, the old Liberal Party of Canada minister, now leader of the Quebec Liberal Party, who did he blame? The Liberal Party. He said it was a stupid decision. We put all our eggs in one basket, and now it's blown up in our face. If you want truth, just ask somebody that used to be a Liberal minister. This tends to be the case across the board. Like, you know, Jody Wilson-Raybould and all the rest of it. Like, they will come out and they'll tell you. That's how you learn.
So I don't know how people watch CBC, like how they watch it, because basically she just gave an excuse for the Liberal Party, blamed Trump for it when it had nothing to do with Trump. And here's some more of them that you can blame on the Liberal Party. So we talked about it yesterday. Cabinet approved subsidies of $16.3 billion for the Volkswagen battery factory in St. Thomas, $15 billion for the Stellantis plant, and $322 billion for the Ford plant in. And then $1.3 billion for that Northvolt factory, and I think not all of it went to them yet. And Honda has just said that they're, you know, like a while ago, Honda said they're going to delay the construction or that plant for a couple of years. But we're going to play this clip here. It just shows you some of the 10 failed and delayed EV planning projects that our government has lost billions of dollars on. Let's play this little clip here. Watch this. There's Northvolt. There's Ford's Oakville thing. Unicor, Northvolt, Lion Electric. That's another disaster. And there's the Honda one. GM Canada. This is just like this. Okay, that's good. This is just all this EV stuff that they spent money on, billions of dollars of corporate welfare to these companies. Lots of them didn't even make EVs, like Honda doesn't even make EVs really. And yet the one company in the world, the leading company in the world that makes electric vehicles, that has a market cap higher than most all the legacy automakers, they label as a Nazi and want nothing to do with it, and he has Canadian heritage. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. Making sense to you?
There are ways to make it make sense, but it becomes very dark, I think. If you turn the lights off, start speaking in a scary voice, then maybe it makes sense. But there's no way to make it make sense.
It's basic
in a sort of happy environment. It's only bad news, this. And I just
climate
the thing is,
clown.
right? They've made all these mistakes. All this money, so much money taken from taxpayers and just incinerated in front of their eyes. And nobody's going to be punished. There is no punishment. It's fine. They're all fine. There's no way that, unless they did something, unless they violated some sort of corruption laws or something like that, which they obviously won't have done. They'll all have been above board and perfect and nice and clean, and all the lawyers will have signed off on it. But there's no punishment. And it's kind of, I've mentioned this before, when the British Empire was slapping the French all over the place and its absolute glorious dominant heyday in the 19th century, and I don't mean when it got sort of fat and lazy at the end of the 19th century. I mean when it was like still vigorous, had a bit of vitality to it. They used to throw people in jail who messed up procurement. You would be punished. I think even in one case, some people were executed. You would be, like, if you screwed up procurement, and this is kind of like procurement, I guess, then the punishments were extraordinary, very, very severe. But I just feel like now, there's plenty of carrot, but where's the stick for these people? They make these gigantic errors, and it's just fine. You know, like, how many mistakes has Champagne made? He got promoted. Do you know what I mean? Like, not only did he not get punished, he's been rewarded. And there's nothing's going to happen to Champagne. He's fine. He's never going to be held to account for all of his failures. And I just feel like, how much longer can we continue with this system where people make egregious mistakes, real serious lapses in judgment, and they don't get any punishment for it?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say these are like climate clowns. They talk about climate, and they don't want to talk about the one company that has has been successful and has the real plan, and yet they continue to fund these corporate welfare projects that many of the MPs have been allegedly helping themselves to a slice of the pie as well. And here's some headlines to kind of like look at it here. Canada pledges billions to Northvolt to build Quebec EV plant. And there you go. Quebec declares Northvolt dead. And then a lot of our pension funds have lost money in there too. Ontario Pension Plan, Government of Quebec, blah, 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 and on and on and on, right? And again, I interviewed Matt Hatfield yesterday from Open Media, and we talked about Bill C-18 and how important it is to have an independent and free media in Canada, which we don't have for the most part. Most of the media that gets the national stage, CBC, CTV, and Global is basically, just about done. Go look at their stock chart course. And he said they continue to fight for Bill C-18 as we do. And a strong democracy demands a free and independent media. And we do not have that other than outlets like ours, which, you'll look at some of the comments here from, especially on TikTok, where, they label and denigrate, and, because, there is a liberal bot army out there that are just like shrieking banshees, right, to make sure that the narrative stays on track. And, I
don't know if they're bots. Maybe, I think they're humans. Maybe they're less intelligent than bots, but I think they're human.
Well, it's disheartening to see how Canada denigrates itself, and we don't have a free and independent media, and that is one of the foundations, is to have a free and independent media that holds power accountable. Because can you say that the Liberals have been held accountable over the past decade?
No, I mean, to an extent, but nowhere near as much as they ought to have been. And to go back to our good friend, or good friends, James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, that's what the First Amendment is about. First Amendment is mostly really about the press. It's about trying to ensure that you can say what you want, and you can hold power to account. That's the sort of philosophical idea behind it. But of course, we aren't so lucky here.
Yeah, they've crippled media with Bill C-18. I mean, we say this over and over. They crippled it with Bill C-18, taking away our audience and really half the traffic and half the revenue. And then they selectively funded some outlets, and then some, like I said, like legacy media. Half the salary, almost half the salaries of these outlets are being paid by the government, the Liberal government, and the CBC, basically fully funded by the taxpayer. Turning our attention a little bit to BC here, though, the BC government running out of money here, and they're starting to just restrict the flow of money to where money is needed, and that's BC schools at a funding crunch. This is after EB promised education assistance in every elementary classroom. Another promise broken.
But like with Carney, promise broken, yeah, but the question that's important is, like, who cares? And I mean that neutrally. I'm trying to actually find the truth here. Like, who actually cares? People like Ellen Sturgo and people that don't like the NDP, yeah, but that's the problem, isn't it? People have to care when they break all these promises. And the same with Carney. Carney's like, I think he's struggling quite a bit, Mark Carney, when I look at it as objectively as possible. But you look at the polls, and it's just happy days. To the extent that they might be thinking, like, we're going to have another election here. So, this is like crazy. We're so far ahead of the Tories.
You would think where we're at in this moment in time, that it should be the opposite. But again, the Liberal media that has really pumped his tires, and you just watch that CBC piece. Northvolt has nothing to do with Trump. And who did they blame? They blamed Trump.
Yep. I mean, he's done enough you don't have to make things up about him. It's like another one. It's like Putin. You don't have to tell lies about Vladimir Putin to criticize the man. Like, he's done enough.
Yeah. Just a healthcare thing to share with you. A friend of mine phoned me and said there's a story, and I don't know if we'll look into it or not, but I do have Brendan Day on tomorrow. We'll talk, and he's a health critic here. Her 86-year-old grandpa went to the urgent care. He fell and needed stitches. And after sitting there for a couple hours, they told him that they're not going to be able to see him today. They come back tomorrow.
What is a bigger priority than that, exactly? What the hell?
That's what I said. Like, what? What are you saying? Hopefully you don't bleed out by tomorrow, but,
I mean, that demographic, that age group,
Well,
the siren should go off right away. As soon as somebody like that walks through the door, you should say, right, let's sort this person out. Because they are, as we got used to hearing during COVID, they are a vulnerable population, aren't they? You got to look after them.
There's some random stuff here. Elon Musk put out this tweet, and this is, like the people identifying as LGBTQ by birth over the years, just by demographic. It seems to be rising. That's all. Just pointing it out. And then we're talking about an Epstein list. You said that they weren't going to release that list. Sounds like there's a flood of information coming. And then here's one here from some of the Epstein victims. And I saw Nancy Mace walk out, and she was crying after she met with the victims here. And let's play this little clip here from one of the victims here, who says she's got a list herself.
Release the files, end the secrecy, and stand with us in declaring that no one, no billionaires, no politicians, not world leaders, is above the law. And let me announce now, several of us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own list of names. We know the names.
That's good. My question is, why not just release the names then? Like, I mean, she seemed quite happy about that. It just release the names. Let's have them.
Yeah. It's important to note that this is happening against the wishes of Donald Trump and his, administration. They don't want this to happen. The person that put this through is that Thomas Massie guy, isn't it, who is a Republican, but the Trump people absolutely loathe him and want to try and destroy his career.
Supposedly, the U.S. House released more than 30,000 files on Jeffrey Epstein. So, well,
that's courtesy of the Democratic Party, not so much the Republican Party, which is very, very interesting to me. Very strange.
This one here should make people scared. But if you watch this from CNN, which is weird, they gave more favorable coverage to this than Donald Trump's military parade. But listen to this; it's just wild. The Americans basically ended the war with Japan, because if it wasn't for the Americans, Japan would likely belong to China.
What's that? Japan would belong to China? Or do you mean China would belong to Japan?
Correct, yeah.
I don't know. It's a hard one, that really. It's very complicated, because the Americans sunk and the British sunk the Japanese fleet, but there's the Chinese that killed the Japanese soldiers by and large. So it's a tricky one, really. It was like,
well, there was those two bombs.
The land war was in China, and they were doing pretty well themselves.
There was those two bombs.
They came up with an agreement, Chiang Kai-shek and Mao. So they were theoretically fighting on the same side. And I mean, China's population was just like way in excess of Japan's. But I mean, definitely, it's hard to imagine it happening without Britain and the US. Put it that way. But it's ironic that the Russians are there and loving it. Vladimir Putin. The Russians did absolutely nothing to help the Chinese. They didn't do a thing.
No.
Except right at the end, they stole some Japanese territory when they knew the war was already over.
Yeah, and this is the thing that many people worried about when the Ukraine war started, and they said that they shouldn't have done that. The American policymakers said that they were just going to force Russia closer to China. And you and I have talked about that in the past too, and it has forced them closer together. And not a good place for that.
And now India is starting to suggest that maybe they want to join that gang, but I think that's...
Economically, they are in there, the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Saudi Arabia is in there. And then so they're added South Africa, and they've added in a couple of potential South American countries. We've got a little bit here on Space Command here. And Donald Trump says that, we won't play the clip because we played it, and he says that Canada got a call from this, maybe what they talked about. He said that Canada wants in on the Golden Dome. And that hasn't been announced in Canadian press, but Donald Trump announced it and said they got a call from Canada, and I'm assuming the Monday call, that Canada wants to be part of the Golden Dome. And then Trump there saying that they're probably he's going to deploy troops in Chicago. And it's just funny, like some even the Democratic media there, or saying like, why wouldn't you take help? I think there were 7 dead in Chicago on Labor Day weekend and 58 shot, wounded. Like the gun violence in there is just absolutely crazy. Another one, there was a hot mic there with Russian President Putin and China's President Xi. We won't play this clip either because it's definitely not in English. Saying that you can now live to 150 years old. They're just transplanting organs and that. So this is what they're saying to each other. And this
I mean, it's so grotesque, isn't it? Because China has been exposed for harvesting organs. Falun Gong, particularly, they're the ones that run the Epoch Times, that newspaper. They've for a very long time been talking about how their organs are stolen from their members when they're like executed and stuff like that. But I mean, there's something so dark and just grotesque about this, especially since Chairman Xi there is wearing a Chairman Mao jumpsuit thing, his little Chairman Mao outfit. I mean, it's just it's grotesque, isn't it?
And even to credit Mark Carney, he identified China as the biggest threat. Yet, the reporter didn't have the courage to ask, why don't we pull back that deal? And why? And how does that CEO of BC Ferries still have his job? And David Eby has yet to answer for it as well, other than just some, like virtue signaling and stuff like that, right?
They just want it to go away. Meanwhile, here we are. We've got this craziness on our computer screens. It's like the situation with China. It's very in your face, isn't it? It's very awkward, but somehow they've succeeded in not really saying anything about it.
This is your friend out of England there. I'm not sure if this has anything to do with it. Maybe you'll add some color to this, but Tommy Robinson said that there's that election there in Germany, and the 7th AfD politician dies ahead of local elections. Were they in the same car, or what's going on there?
No, I've seen one article on this. I'm hardly read into it fully, but it was all natural causes. I think heart disease was one of them. I can't remember what the rest of them were, but I mean, lots of people within the AfD now are starting to say like, bloody hell, that's a bit weird, isn't it? That's a bit of a coincidence. And then obviously the seagulls, like Tommy Robinson, Twitter seagulls, starting to see some scraps on the floor, and they're coming to peck at them.
And then here's your friendly, the people of The Guardian say Europe's population crisis, that they need immigration. So yeah, they're starting to do the work there for the pro-immigrants. And the Guardian, a left-wing publication, blames the far right for concerns about voters on immigration. Nothing to do with all the crime and the riots in the streets. Nothing to see here.
Yeah, nothing's organic. If something emerges among the population, among the voters, like an idea emerges, and they don't like it, The Guardian or any left-wingers, like the more fringe left-wingers, then it has to be that somebody's been in there rabble-rousing. It can't possibly be that the people actually want something that differs from what The Guardian wants. But I thought this was an interesting article just because they go on about immigration. They have 2 scenarios here in The Guardian. Immigration without immigration. That's it. Just those 2 scenarios. And they don't mention at any point in this article this massive analysis that they're so proud of, and they've spent so much time building this little graphic and everything. But they don't mention even one time the possibility that people might just have more children. That's also possible. It doesn't have to be immigration or not immigration. They've just taken it for granted that people will just never have children ever again, and we're just gonna constantly have really low birth rates.
That's our show for today. I do have Renee Merrifield on, a former MLA. She's going to be on with Beyond the Ballot. That's at noon today. We talk about Canadian politics and some U.S. politics, mostly Canadian politics, and some BC. She sat in the House or the Parliament legislature here in British Columbia, and she has some good insights, has lots of connections. And also tomorrow we have Walter Gray, the former mayor of Kelowna here. He'll be here on his 85th birthday too. That's pretty cool. He's here to talk about his book that his son wrote for him, and he has been mayor. He's the longest serving mayor. I shouldn't say running, because he had his sandwich, I think, 2 terms. Then he lost that one to Sharon Shepherd, and then he won again after that, and then he retired after that. And he's a very nice man. He's done a lot. He was here for a lot of big changes here, so he'd be interesting to listen to. So if you're interested in even sending some questions or comments tomorrow, Walter Gray will be on from 11 to 11:30. And then Brennan Day tomorrow at 11:30, I think. He's the health critic for the NDP. We're going to have him. So you have questions, you can just put them in the comments here. So we've got lots of people. And we have the Justice Center, one of the lawyers for the Justice Center. We're going to talk about that COVID report. So lots going on here. And we do appreciate you listening, and we hope you share it. We definitely aren't what you call corrupted by the liberal money machine. You know, maybe they could try.
We've been corrupted by other things, not the Liberals. But somebody asks here, Northern England ? I can only assume that's a question addressed to me, asking if I'm from Northern England, and the answer is yes. You'll not be surprised to learn that.
From the north. So is that where the barbarians live? The north in the old was that movie that was, I can't remember the name of the movie now, where the Romans basically, where it was a Roman that was King Arthur, and they had the savages that lived.
Well, that is true. King Arthur was a Romano Briton, yeah, but not much more like a sort of Welshman, I would say, than your idea of like Julius Caesar or something.
There you go, King Arthur. He would be in shock right now. He'd stick that sword, he'd throw it back at the lake probably and say, I ain't doing this stuff.
What would Merlin do? That's the question. What would his master plan be?
You alluded to. Who's the Merlin of today? He's Canada's Nazi.
What, Elon Musk? I guess so, yeah. He does have some Merlin vibes, Merlin magic tricks.
If there's an alien on this planet...
Was Merlin a Nazi?
If there's an alien on this planet, Sky Canada, they might want to start investigating Elon Musk because he's ahead of his time, for sure, and this amount of stuff gets done. So the doctor there that earns just shy of $400,000, I don't know why she should get asked for a raise, right? Because why does $393 seems like, it's only $7,000 more to get to $400 for her 7
Maybe
staff.
Bonuses are included. If she comes up with a list of potential aliens that could be discovered, then she gets a bonus.
There you go. That's our show for today. Like, subscribe, share. You can also go to kelownanow.com. Always, we update all day long with our news team there. We're actually a real news outlet. We have news reporters. We have the most experienced newsroom in the area. And we do news a little bit different, though. So you'll hear...
We have a laugh.
We'll hear more stuff here. Definitely, it's got some opinion in it and some,
But not the written stuff. This is where we quarantine our opinions and our banter.
And then also, one guy's got great hair, one guy not so much. But I love it when people pick on us for our appearance. And I've been called many names, and some people don't like these glasses. I don't know what's wrong with these glasses, but anyway. Anyway, till tomorrow. Well, I'll be back at noon. So until then, cheers and be safe out there.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.